If you're just joining us today, I'm Claire Natola, Education Coordinator for the Vermont Cheese Council. And I will just remind folks of a couple of logistical points. Feel free to use the chat area to say hello, to introduce yourself. If this is your first session today, feel free to pop into the chat window and say hello, tell us who you are and where you're dialing in from. And you can use that chat window to make any observations or comments to the group during the presentations. However, if you have questions, Marty Mundy, the Executive Director of the Vermont Cheese Council, she'll be leading this discussion and posing her questions to our panelists. And then we're taking additional questions for them that you can put into the Q&A window. So if you have additional questions that go beyond the ones that Marty is asking, feel free to type those in the Q&A window. And we have Jamie Pung. Hi, Jamie. Jamie Pung is back to collect those questions from the Q&A window and present them to our panelists. So thank you, Marty and Jamie, for facilitating this discussion. And if you have any technical issues, please email info@vtcheese.com. That's info@vtcheese.com. And I've gone ahead and put that in the chat window for you in case you need it. I'll remind everyone of that at each of our sessions. Also, I want to remind you that we'll be recording each session, and we will have those recordings available to watch later in the Sched event platform. So we will notify everyone when we have those ready to view in Sched. So let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. When you ask Mike Baptista his title, he replies, doer of many things. And he does those things for Ripe Specialty Foods of Alexandria, Virginia. He began his career selling with Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it was at Zingerman's that he honed his skills running a specialty foods business. So now for Ripe, he oversees everything from sales and events to, as he says, even finicky delivery vans. And I think we all know what it's like to have to juggle those many, many responsibilities. So welcome, Mike. And Maggie Bradshaw is the owner of Truckle Cheesemongers in Richmond, Virginia. Her entree into the professional cheese world began with a part-time job at a local cheese shop while she was working in the association world in Washington, D.C. But of course, she transitioned to cheese full-time because who can resist the lure of cheese? So Truckle Cheesemongers opened in 2019, followed in 2022 by Truckle Cheese Bar, which is a cut-to-order counter that serves grilled cheeses and cheese boards. So welcome, Mike and Maggie, and I will turn it over to Marty to get our discussion started.
Well, my first question actually overlapped a lot with Claire's, and it was if you could both just tell us a little bit about your cheese background, where you started, how you ended up where you are today, and what your current role is, and how you fit into the cheese ecosystem for both of you.
I'll go first. So I'm Michael Baptista, and I work for a small but mighty little distributor in Alexandria called Ripe Specialty Foods. As Marty said, as Claire said, I began cheese at Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, and I've had the opportunity to work on several sort of rungs of the supply chain. My first foray into cheese was at Zingerman's Creamery, so I kind of helped make cheese, but also was the retail and the wholesale manager. So I kind of started in cheese doing kind of like the whole supply chain, which was kind of unique, I think, and really fun. We get to work with amazing producers and some of the best possible customers I could ever have in the DMV area. And I feel very blessed to be in this wonderful industry.
All right. And I'm Maggie. So as Claire said, I own Truckle Cheesemongers in Richmond. So I started working in a cheese shop part-time in my early 20s and sort of eventually got more and more into it. And then after a move, started mongering full-time. And then when I was super pregnant with my second kid, I worked or sort of volunteered my time at a creamery in North Carolina. And then when my family moved to Richmond, I started just doing little pop-ups out of working out of a commercial kitchen. And then we had our first little tiny brick and mortar. And now we have our bigger cheese bar, which allows us to do cut to order, which has sort of always been our backbone, with a focus on educating our customers and letting people taste before they buy. We also do classes and guided tastings, and that's a really important part of who we are, is not just sort of glorified grab and go, but we really want to connect with our customers and tell them stories about where their cheese is coming from. And then we also have the cheese bars. So we do boards and grilled cheeses and sandwiches, which is great to have another revenue stream, but it also helps us keep our waste really low, just from a really practical side. But from when I started in 2016, just doing the pop-ups, I've always worked really closely with Ripe. And part of it, when I was getting going, one of our importers put me in touch with Ripe. And even though I was tiny, I was buying like, I think my first order was maybe $200 worth of cheese. They were willing to work with me, which was great. And we've just always had a really solid relationship. And I probably, I don't know, talk to Mike more regularly than I talk to some of my best friends. So, so it's
Same.
Our working relationship is just really great. And, I probably buy close to 90% of our cheese from Ripe. And a lot of it is because, we work so well together.
Thank you for sharing that, Maggie. I think for our audience, it's really helpful, I imagine, for cheese producers to understand the relationship between retail buyers and distributors and how some of those relationships sometimes can be really close. And I know you guys are a great example of that. And I think it's really helpful also for cheese producers to get an inside view of what that relationship is like, and also what both your experiences are like working with cheese and working further down the cheese distribution line than the cheese making sort of point of sales often can be. So let's dig into that a little bit more. Maggie, I was going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit from your lens how you picked what products are going into your case and how your work with Mike really fits into that?
Okay. So we always have sort of a backbone of cheeses that people know that they can find with us that they can't find elsewhere. So that's probably, I don't know, maybe half of our case. And then I think part of the sign of having a healthy counter is bringing in new cheeses and seasonal cheeses, because it keeps it interesting for me and my mongers, but it also keeps it interesting for our customers and gives them a reason to come back just to see what's new. So some of that, I work with Mike closely. Sometimes if if I'm looking for a cheese for our cheese club, figuring out a good balance of cheeses that way, or if I've sort of put together an order and I say, what else do I need? What else tastes great right now? So sort of having Mike as sort of my, guy on the ground who can tell me what is in stock that is ripe and ready. And, and that's, I think, an important part of how we work together.
Do you always bring in the same products, or do you bring in new things? And how do you identify and pick in a new product to bring in on your end, Maggie?
I love bringing in new things, and part of it, if you sort of hear about sort of hot cheeses that come about, a little bit is that, but a lot of it is just sort of what Mike is seeing from the distribution side. If he takes a cheese trip and he's got all these great new cheeses he's excited about, then that helps me get excited about it. And then I pass it on to my mongers and customers. And so it's sort of this snowball effect of, what's new, what tastes great, what's the backstory on it. Anytime that we can connect our customers with, the story of the creamery, or why the cheese is the way it is, or why the rind is the way it is, or just sort of any little tidbits are important because our customers are really interested in that. So, yeah.
And Mike, going upstream in that supply chain, how do you pick what products you've got in your warehouse or on your own sales list?
Well, for me, it's sort of two main criteria. The things I look for first is flavor, like, wonderful full flavor. And then I really like to look for cheeses and products that follow traditionally made, like that are very traditional in their orientation. So for me, full flavor and tradition are super important. And then, we look at ourselves as stewards of cheese in a lot of way, and stewards of these of these often ancient techniques. And in a world that's rapidly becoming more AI focused, I like that our industry is very old school and very hands-on in the best ways possible. So the pallets are the first tool, and then the second is relationships. Really, just building really strong relationships with producers and importers, to the point where sometimes I can't taste everything, but I'm speaking with people who I have tons of trust with. And, I think luckily I've helped establish that trust with customers like Maggie, that, if she can't taste something first, she knows that if I'm like, okay, this is great right now, totally worth jumping on, she'll listen to me. And the only reason, that can happen is because we're able to choose those great full flavored traditional products. And so the other part is trying to, not every customer is necessarily the type of, has the same vision Maggie has. So the other piece is me figuring out what our customers want and like how to get it for them in the best possible way that still aligns with our ethos. And luckily, it's never been a problem so far.
A lot of relationships. I feel like for both of you, you're kind of telling the story of trusting upstream sort of tasters and experiencers along the way. Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mike, I asked you this night, or asked Maggie this, and I'll ask you, what helps you decide to put a product that's not already on your sales list onto your inventory list?
So the things that help again are discussions with producers and importers. If it's something that's like a brand new thing, generally like or super hot, like Maggie was saying, like the sort of buzz is out there. And I have some key people that help kind of focus, that cut through the buzz, to the heart, the meat of the matter is whether it's a really great product or not. So there's that piece. And usually, it's tasting. Like when I work with someone, they'll send me a box full of samples saying this is what is super hot right now and super great, super new. They send it to me, and I get to evaluate it with my team, which is one other person, team of one, team of two. But yeah, so being able to taste the really, really is key, I think, for on all levels, because the cheeses speak for themselves.
For both of you, what do your own customers want in the products that they buy from you? Just knowing again, kind of that we're following the stream of cheese as it moves through the distribution system. So what is most important to your own customers?
I think our customers, I think a lot of what they're looking for is they know that we take good care of the cheese while it's sort of in its life cycle. So if they come to us and say, I want something that's like super ripe, ready to go, or I like this style, but I like a younger, I like to eat it on the younger side. I think having us be trained enough to help them figure out exactly what they want in a flavor profile, or if they come in and say like, I love manchego, but I want something a little different, and we can help guide them in a different way, but sort of them having the confidence in us that we can send them home with a product that they really like. And we also encourage people to taste before they buy, just like if Mike throws a sample or two my way, that's helpful too. But I think especially with consumers, it's important to let them taste, because sometimes they think they know things that are a little bit different, on sort of in flavor profiles. But I think just being educated and having our mongers educated, and so we can give a good customer experience, I think is a big part of why people come to us for cheese instead of going to Wegmans or the Murray's counter at Kroger, because it's so different. So
Maggie, a quick question to follow up. Is the story about the cheese producer as important about the cheese itself, or does it usually end up being cheese flavor and experience?
well, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the flavor of the cheese, because people are here because they want to eat cheese. I think any sort of story or background that we have to help convey why the cheese is the cheese is really helpful, and those little tidbits um, are part of the reason that people come to us. But at the end of the day, having healthy cheese in the case, like if you go into a lot of places and you see cheese dying under plastic, and it's just sort of a bummer. Like, we really make an effort to clean our cheese and care for it as it's aging. So we're a part of making sure that the cheese tastes good as well. But I think it's the combination of the high level of customer service and us taking care of the cheese and the story, and that's sort of our big package with a bright red bow.
And Mike, the same question for you. What are your customers looking for and want in the products that they are buying from you? Like, are there specific qualities or
Yeah.
quantities, et
So,
cetera?
like, as we've all, been sort of saying over and over, quality and good flavor, I think, are number one. And for me, in order to convey this, to customers, I really love compelling stories about, knowing about the producer, about their family, about their animals. I've worked with, cheesemakers where I know the names of the cows that make the milk that we eat. I think all of these kinds of pieces really come into play. Packaging is a thing for sure. Personally, Zingerman's never really put a big priority on packaging. It was really all about the cheese, but I know that's like what works for one specific place and it doesn't work for everybody. So, packaging, I think, really comes into play. I mean, price obviously comes into play. We have the great ability to not need to sell cheap cheeses to keep ourselves going. It's just not. So I'm coming from a very specific niche that I know not every distributor can, but luckily we can. But pricing, of course, is a concern for everybody, myself included. And then, finding out what the customer wants, if it's something new, if learning that, like, oh, I know that Maggie likes bloomy cheeses at this kind of age because that's what works best for her. And there could be someone that likes them super, super uber ripe, or someone that wants them super, super young, just kind of figuring all that out and tracking it so that I can keep that going for people. And then, being able to stand by our products is a really important thing. So oftentimes that comes down to money and being able to credit our customers, which means I need to have that great relationship with producers and importers too, so that we can all try to help cover that cost when things don't go as hoped or planned, which happens because it's a living, breathing product, unlike our iPhones that are the same every time. So I answered that. But mainly it comes down to just knowing. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I have a couple
Go
of
ahead.
questions related to what you just said. So given that you're able to be picky about what you decide to bring on, for a micro or small scale producer, how big is big enough to sell to you?
For me in particular, it doesn't matter really. It's just a matter, honestly, it comes more down to logistics of being able to get it. So that's I mean, I would prefer to work with, tiny tiny people, because we are competing with big boys in the area that can sell sometimes the same cheese for much less than we can, because they can run much lower margins. So in terms of in terms of wanting to work with them, it's always there. It just always kind of comes down to logistics, because trucking is super expensive. We have little vans that we deliver with, but we can't, we don't go and pick up from farms. So it's the thing that we're looking at. But so really it's, luckily, like everyone probably knows Larkin, luckily they consolidate a lot of these great producers there. That kind of piece makes things a lot easier for us. But yeah, so I'd love to work with anyone that has good stuff, just as long as I can get it in a way that, again, like I said, pricing isn't, we're happy being high priced, but we can't sell cheeses, all of them, for $40 a pound or anything. So we have to be able to get it.
And do you work mainly with sales reps, or do you kind of visit the farm and talk to the cheesemaker and do your selections, that kind of thing?
I would say right now it's mainly working with reps and importers. We do, so us personally, we have a nice little domestic portfolio, but we do a lot of like things like Neal's Yard and Essex and those kind of cheeses. So I have got to do sales trips here, or farm visits, but often it's just working with the next level down and visiting with them and going to events like CMI or ACS. Good food, all those are really, really great opportunities to make those connections.
Great. One clarification, did you say sheep? You don't need to sell cheap cheese or sheep cheese to keep going?
Cheap cheese.
With a C,
I love
okay.
to sell sheep cheese.
Okay.
Yes. We like we try to have a range, but it's not, I don't need to have that too many super, super high margin, low cost products in order to keep our doors open. Because I didn't mention the other side of our business is that all the Irish bars in the DMV buy like their bangers and bacon and beans and all that stuff from us too. It's part of our story. And an Irish expat that lives in, musician guy that also delivered stuff to Irish bars one day was just asked, "Hey, can you get this cheese for us?" And he had no idea, but he's like, "Yep, I can." And then somehow within a couple of years was selling some of the best cheeses in the world because so that side of the business, like I said, we're kind of unique. That really helps fuel the other side of the business.
So related to that, what do the both of you consider to be quality cheese, if you were to define it?
That's a good question, Maggie. I'll let you go first.
I mean, I think, I mean, honestly, something that tastes great, something that is, has a sort of a robust, flavor profile, even if it's a delicate cheese, something that tastes like it was made for a reason. I think good cheese is good cheese at the end of the day. It doesn't have to, we don't always have to have something that challenges every palate, or something that's like as funky as possible, or as sheepy as possible, or it's, it doesn't have to be aggressive. I think, really mild, lovely cheeses are also great, but just a cheese that's made well and tastes great, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean that nails it. And I would say, I look a lot for the intentionality of the producers, because I really think that translates into the flavor of the cheese. I don't know if it's sort of a mystical, spiritual aspect of it or whatever, but I mean, there was a famous Supreme Court case about something that I won't name, but you know it when you taste it, kind of thing. Like you can tell good quality cheese with the first bite, and I think it's because all the way from farm to table, use a cliched term, it's those steps are followed, and it just kind of shines through the product itself. And inferior cheeses just don't taste as good and they don't feel, the mouthfeel isn't there. So I think it all comes down to flavor, texture, mouthfeel, all those kind of things. When good quality milk is used in traditional methods and great environments for the cheeses to age, I mean, the cheese speaks for itself.
I also think this is sort of, everyone gets bogged down in, running a business, or sort of the day-to-day troubles of, that we all deal with. But I feel like those moments of clarity when we get a cheese in and you taste it, either if it's a new cheese or something that you've carried but sort of forgot about, or it sort of went on the back burner, and you have this moment of like, oh my God, it's incredible. And that's sort of why, it's like, that's why I love being in the cheese industry, and doing what I do and helping to pass that kind of cheese joy on to our customers. And I feel like that's really sort of it's that hook that keeps us all, working towards the same common goal of passing on great cheese to other people.
I'm going to jump in with a question sort of related to cheeses that maybe aren't always in your lineup. Our audience has a number of seasonal cheese producers who produce a product that varies in properties from spring to summer to fall and winter. And in our group, I know amongst us here, we've talked offline about the difference between seasonal changes in a cheese and inconsistency on a daily or weekly basis. Can one or both of you share a little bit about if and how inconsistency in product affects you as a seller versus seasonal changes?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
So we're always up for seasonal cheeses, and that's part of a story that we can tell to our customers. And that I can have the conversation with my staff, sort of talking about how the milk changes, and we can appreciate that and sell it a little differently while we're pointing that out to customers when we're tasting out. I think it's harder with imperfections, specifically with like problems with rind development or cheeses that are wildly different from a batch date of like one day to the next day. If it's like a phage problem, or I don't know what's going on, but it's hard for me to buy, especially if I'm planning on buying something for Cheese Club, if I need, 20 or 30 pounds of something and every wheel is crazy different, that's a hard sell. And it also means that we end up wasting more if there are problems with the paste, or like a really wet rind, stuff like that, that is harder to take care of and clean up in the shop. So we love seasonal. We just sort of want to know generally what to expect. And that'll help me teach my people, if it looks like this, you can do this to help it, but just sort of the expectation of the flavor profile that we're going to get is important.
Yeah, just piggybacking on that. So for us, seasonality is a feature, not a bug. Like it's a great thing. One of the things that I love about our product, which that's what makes this such a good question, because there's seasonal inconsistencies, but then there's just inconsistencies that could just be due to, any number of factors. Just something that happened on one day that affects a big batch that's gonna have a ripple effect kind of down the line. And so yeah, it's a really interesting question to pick the line. Like a certain amount of inconsistency I expect, or I'm totally okay with. Like again, we're not making widgets. It's a thing that's gonna change. But you can get beyond that range, and that's when it just comes down to, for us as a distributor, the buck stops with our customers. Like Maggie, if she doesn't feel like the cheese is up to spec, the cheese isn't up to spec for her, and then we issue a credit, and that's it. I want at the end of it, we're stewards of the cheese, but we're also here to serve Maggie, and so she can in turn serve her customers. So so it can be tough, and it just happens, and then if there was a problem, things were bad with one particular batch of a cheese, which happens all the time. Maybe get a triple cream that I just get in, and it's I cut it in half to look at it, and it just spills out everywhere. Not what you were obviously not what anyone's looking for at that time, and you just move on. Sometimes we do have to make hard decisions, like, oh, this might not be a product for us anymore. But the way I determine that is to have that discussion with the producer or the importer and find out, hey, what's going on at the farm right now? Like what? And so I know this is a question down the line. This is like one of I think for producers, the best thing for them is just communication. Talking to the people, their reps that they sell to, say, hey, this is what this batch is tasting like right now. This is because no one wants. We're happy to be surprised by something being better than we expected. That's a great problem, but no one wants to be surprised by something that we've bought for years, maybe even, and then all of a sudden it's what's going on with this? But you can mitigate all of that with the discussion, or most of it with the discussion, I think. And we're all in this together, and we know that these things happen. So I think as long as I'm not surprising Maggie, or maybe she didn't taste it, and then she gets a really angry guest coming in, being like, "What's going on with my triple cream? Oh my gosh!" Like she knows that that's a potential issue and can make the decision. Oh, maybe I won't buy it this time, or maybe I will, and be able to tell the customer why it's this way this time.
And I'm going to jump in because I know of an example like this. So what about when it's a not a bad shift, right? So like, for example, I had a cheese producer I was selling for a little while, and she had a cheese that she made, and the cows were shifting. There's a issue with feed in the field. I can't remember if it was too wet or too dry, but they were temporarily given a different feed because the farmer just didn't have enough feed, and it changed the flavor profile for the cheese for like a week. It went from being very nutty to being very caramelly. If you get that kind of thing in, again, is it just communication that you're looking for? How would you want to know about that from cheese producers?
I mean, definitely, phone call or an email communication, absolutely. Yeah, and just so I can be armed with the knowledge to tell Maggie, there's obviously this example now, like, hey, your Gouda that you normally get this time is going to be a little bit more on the caramely end than the nutty end, or whatever it is. But I think as long as she knows that going in, and then unfortunately, maybe knowing that this is a position I'm sure I know from working at the creamery and working now, sometimes people are going to say no, and that's a tough position. It's very tough, and for us, we just know that we might take a loss sometimes on a cheese, because this is what we want to do. We want to make sure the cheese is at this certain spec, and if it's not, we're willing to do that. And I never try to hide the way a cheese is with our guests, because that just leads to problems.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, can you guys explain that? Because I think for cheese producers, right, if you're selling yourself, like if I'm going to a farmer's market and selling myself, I can navigate that variability with my direct customer. Can you help folks understand from the standpoint of, for example, like Maggie, I've been in your position when I've been selling cheese, where maybe you're looking for a specific lineup of cheeses, so you have a breadth and depth of cheese that you sell. Can you help one or both of you maybe explain like why sometimes someone might not want that different flavored cheese if they're really looking to fill a specific gap in their lineup? I mean, even if it's delicious, that kind of scenario, for example.
So you mean just if we're looking for something very specific and we get a different sort of, usually we can still sell it just fine if we just sort of take a slightly different approach. Especially if things end up being sort of on the funkier, more aggressive side. We have customers who we know want really crazy cheeses, and they, the people who come in and say like, what's the craziest thing you have in the case right now? Most of the time it's still fine. We just sort of modify our sales tactics a little bit. And then like Mike was saying, if somebody comes back to us with a cheese and say, this tastes totally different than I thought it was going to taste, or, even though hopefully they would have tasted it before they bought it. But if somebody's upset, our go-to is always to say, well, what can we do to make it right? And we'll often take a loss just because our relationship with our customer is worth bringing them back in, as opposed to being like, well, it looks like you ate, 2 ounces of it, so I'm only going to that kind of stuff. We always want to go above and beyond and make people feel comfortable communicating back with us things about the cheese that they love or didn't like, and we respond to that both with them, and then I'll go back to Mike and say, do you know what, so it's sort of this, everyone's talking to everyone, and then we figure it out. But we also will take a loss if we need to, just to have people come back through the door. And then if, and then next time, if the cheese is still sort of different, then we'll sort of go about it a different way. But sometimes cheese gets weird, and that's part of the game. But, I think having that focus on communication all along, from the customer to distributor to importer to farm to wherever is important.
For me, it's so definitely a lot of what Maggie said, and then could also be finding creative ways to still use the cheese or creative outlets for it. Like what might not work for one of our retail customers may work great for a restaurant customer, or may work great for someone that needs a cheese to bake with. That doesn't need to be at this flavor profile straight out of the counter, but when it's an ingredient in a croissant or something, then it's going to be great. So it's finding new creative ways to use it, communication, and then just hope, just standing behind the product. And I think what Maggie does a great job with her customers, and I hope to do, is just always educating people about what cheese is, and to expect sort of a range of flavor for one cheese. And then when that customer comes into your shop, that I think this is really key, is like, as a monger at the counter, tasting through your case every day to taste where cheeses are at, so that when Joe Schmo comes in and what he likes, and he's going for the cheese he usually likes, hey Joe, this time I think you might be more better steered in this direction, and then keeping that relationship going, if that makes sense.
Definitely. All right. Let me ask another question, sort of somewhat related to this and related to the communication piece of things. Is there anything that particularly helps you sell seasonal or artisan products that you sell today, or things that you wish you had or got but that you don't get today from cheese producers or from wherever?
So I think producers that we work with that do it, the seasonal, that do it really well. I mean, they market the seasonality of their cheese, as I said before, is like a feature, not a bug. Like this is, like Pleasant Uplands does a great job with this, with the Rush Creek, or like Brabander Reserve, those kind of cheeses. Things that come out only seasonally, we anticipate it every year. We're looking forward to it. It's become such a part of what we do that, like, we love that seasonality. Or we work with for like fresh goat cheese and some ash ripened like logs. We work with a little farm that's in Pennsylvania, just around the corner, and he dries up and he doesn't sell for 3 months a year, and that can be really tough for people to deal with. But it's become like, I think, I can't wait for Brad's cheese to be back. We're almost to March. It's going to be great. He sends me pictures of his goat when they're super pregnant, so I can share them with people, so that we know that the milk's coming soon. So I think being able to market that seasonality is super, super important. And then just great information, having access to one sheets or a website that has great info for all of their cheeses that I can point people to, or I can download and share. Tasting notes are really good. One of our importers, every week, they send out a list of tasting notes of their cheeses, of where they're at, and they have a team that tastes through every batch, and they're like, this is what this batch tastes like now. They send me like a little bit of information, and I can share that with people and be like, hey, this is what this cheddar is going to taste like this time. This is why it's great. This is maybe an issue you're going to have with it. And then they can make those educated decisions. And then just, knowing, I know for me, it's just, I mean, I'm a sucker for knowing people. So like just knowing about the farm, the family, the farms, the animals, their pets, all of that kind of stuff. Like it just makes me just really plug into what they're doing. I buy into it pretty easily.
I agree with all of that. I mean, I think especially with the marketing, the seasonality, if people are excited and they're anticipating this cheese coming in, they'll call us or they'll email me or they'll keep checking in to see when it is. So it builds this sort of excitement, which is awesome. And it's sort of, it's just automatic goodwill, which is great. And then the rest of it too, just communication, tasting notes, anything that makes it easier for me to sell, any sort of connection goes a long way, even if it's, I feel like even with my own business, I should have more marketing materials printed at a printer than I do, but that kind of stuff is easy to put on the back burner. But just, anything, just a quick email or, the more Mike knows, the more Mike can tell me, then I can tell my mongers and customers and blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't have to be in the prettiest package. It doesn't have to be, high production value all the time. It's just the information that's really like the meat of it. So
That's Maggie. I was going to ask you, are you getting your tasting notes specifically from someone like Mike, or are you also going to folks' websites, or do you have like this document in the back of in your office there? Like, do you have like a thing you reference? How do you get your actual tasting notes, or do you make them yourself fully?
it sort of depends. I mean, especially if I'm doing a class or cheese club tasting notes, because I do a write-up on the background of each cheese, flavor profile, and then we do pairing suggestions also. So anything on the story side of that, if I'm going to present or pass on information, I'll ask Mike if he has stuff, or I'll look online. And then I always taste, even if I have sort of a general flavor profile that I found, that's what they're going for. I always taste and then tweak and modify, depending on how the cheese tastes at the moment that I'm getting ready to present it or sell it or pack it up. So it's sort of, I think, having too much information is always better for me, because you can sort of, you can sift through it and then pick out what's working, how you need it to work, and however you're using the cheese.
And for both of you, compared to today and how you get your information about cheeses and cheese producers today, if you could get whatever information you wanted in whatever way that you wanted, what would that look like and be?
So I guess I would say just, good. I'll put it two ways. So I understand it's really hard, because I have a really hard time creating all of these materials. It's time consuming, and we're often really small businesses and, of one or two people, and it's hard to do. So I would say, here's an idea for a great business. Someone needs to do this for all of us and make a centralized location that we can get this info from. So like a great website, again, I'm not like say the Vermont Cheese Council has a part of their website where they have all of the producers, and they have names of cheeses and pictures and documents that people can use, maybe tasting notes of specific batches. I know some of that gets unrealistic, but that would be the best of all possible worlds. Just so that's what I want to have on our website for everyone. And as anyone that's been to our website knows, I don't, because it just takes a lot of time. And one of the hats I have is also web designer, apparently. So like I don't know how many distributors are quite like us, but I imagine there's more like it. And a lot of cheese shops are very small businesses. So just having that info easily accessible to all of us would just really go a long way. So, and I think the best way is like a website with downloadable PDFs. Social media is a really, really great way to learn information about specific cheeses, sure, but also just this, you can tell the story of your farm through social media. That I think is a great way for people to get info about that farm. And you can see when people do that right, you feel like the person like super well. I think that's a great way to go. Yeah.
We have about 15 minutes left.
Maggie, do you have anything else compared to your current version of what you experience?
No, I mean, I agree that anything centralized would make it easier, and just less work. I may be more liable to buy more, or put it in our sort of rotation if there's more information. But yeah, I think just ease of, even if I can find it myself or if I can get it from Mike, just sort of open communication lines.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn it over. Jamie, do you have questions on your end that you're getting?
I do, yeah. So I have a few kind of nuts and bolts type questions. So one cheesemaker says, what's the best way to cold call if you're looking for more wholesale or distributors? And then when you talk about packaging, are you referring to individual cheeses or case sizes? And does the style of cheese make a difference to that?
So yes, mainly for the individual cheeses. So for what the packaging is when they're at the point of sale. So there's the look and feel of the packaging. I mean, definitely, like I said, never been the hugest thing to me, but it's very important to a lot of people to have eye-catching, colorful, all that kind of stuff packaging. But from my cheese loving side, it's having packaging that does the cheese the best, that takes care of the cheese in the best way possible. Because like having not taking a blooming cheese and cryovacking it and slapping a label on it, which I don't think many people do, but just as an extreme example, just having the package take care and represent the cheese in a way that's great for the health of the cheese, and also that represents like the sort of story of the cheesemaker and catches people's eyes in a sea of many little white things with labels on them.
I also think for especially small format cheeses where we're not necessarily cutting them and selling them by weight, that it's just we'll take one and waste it and sample it out, and then people are buying the whole cheese. I think packaging is a lot more important for the health of the cheese and also for just drawing people's attention to it. Larger format cheeses that we're breaking down, I don't think that's as nearly as important for our sales. But even sort of as cheese prices have gone up, we honestly have a much easier time selling something that we can cut, because it's really a hand sale if you're asking somebody to spend $20-$25 on one piece of cheese. That takes some time to actually sell and convey why it's special. Anything that we can cut, I'm more likely to buy, because somebody can get 2 or 3 ounces and that's part of their cheese board and it's great. But that's something that's sort of changed slowly over the past few years for us.
That one thing, so this is why I just love working with Maggie, because she has that outlook. Sadly, for me, I find not every one of my customers is in that position. So there's a lot of people out there that just have a grab and go case, that just don't maybe have the staff or manpower to really dive into selling the cheese. That is where that makes it, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's too strong to say necessary evil, but it just definitely makes it a thing that I think you need to think of as a producer, because a lot of times the cheese literally is speaking for itself, like on the shelf. Yeah. Was there a first part to that question?
Yeah, it was what's the best way for a cheesemaker to cold call or kind of
Cold
get
call.
in front of you? Yeah.
Man, I think the phone calls are the best way, I think, for me. But they're going to run into the problem that I know I voicemail a lot of calls, especially for numbers that I don't recognize. So I think like a phone call, email, and text messaging is probably the best way. And also just be persistent, I think. It's easy to worry about being too persistent, I think, but really easy these days to ignore an email. So I don't think you need to worry about offending anyone, particularly if you stand behind and think you have a great product. I think it's just being able to spend the time to be persistent and sending samples. Sending samples is a great way to go.
Do you ever bring on a new producer from Maggie's recommendation? Say someone, a cheesemaker drops off something to let her taste, and Does she ever call you and say, "Oh, this is great. You should carry this"?
I think you have in the past. But I mean, luckily Maggie buys most of her cheese from us already, which I need many more Maggies in the world. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say that hypothetically, if she ever was like, "Oh my God, this cheesemaker just dropped off a cheese, I know you'd love it," because of the relationship I have with her, I'd jump all over it for sure.
And then we also have a couple of questions about cheese selections. So, are there cheese styles that you see a lot of and that you really don't need any more of? Are there cheese styles that you think would do really well and you don't see enough of?
So I don't know anything there. I feel like we have a good mix of sort of tomes. But those are always great because their shelf life is so much longer. And so we have more time to work with them. So I would say those are, or yeah, I mean, blues. I feel like I don't see as many domestic blues as I would like to see.
Yeah, blues was the first thing that came to mind too, particularly like, great raw goat's milk blues or sheep's milk blues. That would be amazing. I agree about the bloomies. I think it's kind of both of those for me. I mean, there's a lot of sort of bloomies out there. But for me, there's just not, I haven't found, maybe, and again, probably no one in this room, but they're sometimes not very exciting to me personally. And so I guess, and that's hard to quantify, but I'm looking for more knock my socks off kind of breeze and bloomies. And more for, honestly, for me here in my market, I'm just looking, I would love to find more local bloomies. There's not a lot here in the DMV. Good opportunity for any Vermont cheesemakers that want a change of scenery. We need you.
And for either of you, do you ever take responsibility for ripening the cheeses that you get?
We don't do any affinage right now. I would love to get into that, but that's project for down the line. But I do some triage work, which maybe sometimes borders affinage in some ways, but mainly it's more sort of triaging. We have just two very not particularly large coolers, so maybe in the future, I would love to get into that.
We also don't have a ton of extra space, but we do we did a class last month and got some Sophia from Capriol, and I saved one little log back just to age it out. So it's hanging out, just getting fudgier and fudgier, and I'm excited about that. But I peek in on it every day. But we don't have anything formal, just in space and resources and all that. So
I do have a couple other customers though that do some affinage in their shops. There's one in DC that does. There's a restaurant in DC that they do a lot of aging of meats and lardo and some of our cheeses too, which is cool.
Here's another question. So, what labels matter to consumers in your experience? Organic, animal welfare approved, gluten-free, any others?
So, I mean, for me, a lot of those don't really matter. I don't know if we're still in the late 2000s, 2010, mid 2010s, organic was like a huge craze. And that's when I worked at Zigerman's Creamery, and we looked into getting organic certification. And I was like, whoa, this is a lot of money and time, and it's kind of like a racket. So I wasn't really into it personally, but I do think it does hold some value for customers in some markets. Yeah, that's always been a tricky one for me because, like when I was there, we were for all intents and purposes an organic producer, but definitely couldn't put that on the label. So yeah, so I'm gonna say not super important for me, but I think that's probably maybe not the case for people like Maggie or her customers, but I'll let her speak to that.
I think, I mean, I agree. People love the word organic but it's the same thing, like sort of words that don't mean anything like natural. And I think consumers know that. And I also don't think like with the animal welfare approved, I don't think consumers really know what that means. So if it's sort of a story we can convey without somebody having to go out and get this certification, I think that's just as valuable as having a small format cheese that has these stamps on it that say organic or AWA or whatever. I think it's as long as sort of most of the places we work with really are committed to the welfare of their animals, and we pass that on to customers. So I don't think putting resources in for an extra certification would make a huge difference for my customers.
And I wonder
Yeah,
really if it
yeah.
wonders on where your placement is, right? So like if you're in a shop like Maggie's where someone is really curating the buying experience versus a grabbing scenario from a case where there's cheeses that folks are grabbing, say like in an artisan grocery store where there's sort of self-serve. I would
Yeah.
wonder if that matters too.
I think that would definitely make a big difference. So yeah, I think definitely everything Maggie said is how we feel, and I look for those things. You know, I definitely, like I said earlier, the farms that name their cows, they're probably going to take good care of their cows. Like I look for that kind of thing, but I don't want them to have to pay ungodly amounts of money to get a certification just to show that that's who they are. I think we as the sellers of the cheese can hopefully tell people that. But it gets tricky in those places where there isn't a hand selling kind of thing going on.
Okay, and this question is an old chestnut. How important is new cheeses? Would you rather have makers doing R&D to get you new things, or have them focus on making a good cheese that stays good or improves? How important is the new?
I think
I mean, no, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. When I think of new cheese, it doesn't have to be like hot off the presses. We just started this whole new process. Really, if it's new to me, that's what I think of as new. So as long as, it's a great cheese, and I'm always looking for new producers, and, I think that's more important than trying to sort of reinvent the wheel, literally, so yeah, I think just good quality, great taste is what I'm looking for.
And I would say new, not completely, not terribly important to me, but or the idea of just pumping out new for the sake of new, like, and I think I've seen that in the market, and it just kind of makes me like, makes me think you're doing so many things. Can you possibly be doing any of them super, super well? So it is the new to me kind of thing. That is my job, is to curate our list and find cool, exciting new things. But that's not to say, if making something new, if this farm is like, oh my God, I just learned this new technique and I'm really into it, or I just started having goats and I've been in a sheep farm the whole time, like that kind of thing, I think is great, and particularly if there's like a lot of intentionality and thought and behind why they're doing it, and excitement that just builds the excitement and all that. So I personally don't care about new for the sake of new at all.
Thank you so much, Mike and Maggie. There was some fantastic information presented today. I think you were able to answer a lot of questions that our members have had for quite a long time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And many thanks to Marty and Jamie for fielding such great questions to them. We are going to take a break for lunch. So we will reconvene at 1:45 Eastern Time for another panel discussion. And this will be on business exit planning and considerations. Succession planning is a big topic on the minds of many cheesemakers and small farmers. And so please join us for that discussion. So that will be at 1:45 Eastern time. So enjoy your lunch break, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.